backhands at midcourt for the win. He got it! Three, not out of defense. Zamora.
Welcome to another installment of Moments with Mario, featuring New Mexico State University Athletic Director Mario Mocha. Moments with Mario is brought to you by BMC Technologies. BMC Technologies is a full-service technology company that empowers small businesses and specializes in cybersecurity, networking, and managed services. Welcome to another edition of Moments with Mario. I'm Brad Beasley alongside New Mexico State Athletic Director Mario Mocha. Hey Mario, there's been some really interesting stuff regarding student discipline lately, especially maybe that school we don't talk about up north. But how do you guys handle student discipline, student athlete discipline?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different components to that. Certainly, it matters a little bit. If it's a homegrown, if it's a freshman versus a transfer. Mm-hmm. Most of the freshmen are coming out of high school, and if there's an infraction, we have our student athlete handbook. There's the university's general code of conduct that the dean of students, Dr. Ann Goodman, oversees. Mm-hmm. So in the past, those had interfaced. At the beginning of this year, we've kind of seeded, some criminal, when there's criminal liability, whether right. It's a DUI or you name it. Mm-hmm. Really, that is now handled by the dean of students, and that way we're treating every student, the same way. There's not a separate set of disciplinary rules. Now, the athletic department and the cheer squad and the band and all these other clubs certainly have the ability to hand down further discipline. Right. But one of the things that makes things interesting is the litigation that has crept into student discipline. Mm-hmm. So now it's not just, hey, the school has punished me. Now it's, hey, I might go get a lawyer and, sue the school because they didn't follow their procedure, right. Or I wasn't treated fairly. So, you see that cropping up a little more. So it's really critical that the university follows their protocols and documents everything they're doing. Right. Now, there's another little component, too. There's the OIE, Office of Institutional Equity.
The Title IX. That's
Title
IX,
IX,
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when there's those kinds of infractions, whether that's a domestic violence allegation or what have you, that's another pathway. Right. That student discipline can flow in addition to the dean of students. And, what we try to do at New Mexico State, because, we are a school that probably takes a little more transfers. So when you take a higher number, right. There's also a higher number of potential, issues in an individual's background. We try to do as much of our detective work up front. Mm-hmm. We talk to the coaches. We talk to the school that, the student athlete right. might be transferring from. We talk to the administrators. We talk to the people that know him, relatives, et cetera. So we try to gather as much information as possible. Mm-hmm. And then, at New Mexico State, contrary to popular belief, the athletic director doesn't have a little, scepter and an orb and a crown where right. I just, hand down edicts. We have to go through the school. So really right. the school has to admit the student. It's not the athletic program. Right. Now, oftentimes, I'm the first one who knows of the student that is being recruited. And if there is an issue, I will know of it. And then I will sit down with the proper individuals and say, here mm-hmm. is what we're looking at. Here's all the documentation I can get. What else would you like to know or have prior to making a decision or a recommendation to the president? Mm-hmm. So ultimately, they will then contact, so our Title IX or OIE office might contact that school. Our dean of students might contact some people. So, mm-hmm. That's really the way it works, because I know there's a whole lot of, the fans I know love to chime in when there's a discipline issue, but there is some set protocols that are followed and have to be followed, or else you run into a problem.
Well, that's always good, because it's nice to know that you guys are trying to treat all the athletes the same, because I remember when I was growing up, I'd tell my mom, well, how come I can't do what's going on there? She goes, Brad, because you're an athlete and you're held to a different standard than everybody else.
Well, when I sit in on recruiting meetings, and it's one-on-one with me and the prospective student athletes right. and their parents or coach, I said, hey, you're in Las Cruces. So you're a big fish in a small pond. You have 100,000 people in our city.
Right.
You've got 3 TVs from El Paso, the newspaper here, whether it's the Bulletin and the Sun News, and all the radio stations. From a sports standpoint, we're it. So when you're at the grocery store or you're you're at La Posta or Applebee's or wherever you are, people are going to know who you are. So, you need to be cognizant of that. And, whether that's fair or unfair, it doesn't really matter. It is what it is. And so that's why we always try to do a lot of education on the front end. And when I also, the other thing too, we always tell our student athletes when something happens,
right?
If you're at a party and you get a minor in possession or whatever, I certainly understand the first inclination is don't tell the coach,
right?
Don't tell anybody because I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to lose my scholarship. Hey, the reality is you're a young person. We're here to help you. We're here kind of in lieu of your parents or your guardians. So our first inclination isn't chop the heads off of our children,
right?
Okay? It's to guide you. Now, might there be some punishment for that? Certainly.
Right.
But at the end of the day, don't feel free because what's worse is when we find out from another source.
Or in the papers.
And in the paper. And 99% of the time, we find out.
Right. So it's always an entertaining day for you, I imagine.
Yeah, and especially, as you know, when we were student athletes, we didn't have this thing called social media.
That's correct.
Thank
goodness.
Yeah, I mean, you've got not just, Snapchat and Twitter and Instagram and all these things where you have a whole army of people. So if you did something wrong, which I know you never did.
Never.
Now it's not just, hey, don't, to your buddies, hey, don't say anything. Well, now it's pretty much the universe knows what you did if it was caught, if it was recorded, and it's pretty hard to conceal those things these days.
I'm glad you guys do. That'll do it for another edition of Moments with Mario.